On today's episode, we will be exploring Florida's role in the American Civil War. Florida's role was shaped by its strategic location, valuable resources, and unique military contributions. Although Florida was a relatively small state with a small population, it played a significant role in the Confederate war effort, and its efforts had a lasting impact on the state and its people. The road to war. Florida's road to secession was influenced by its plantation economy, Southern ties, and the rise of the abolitionist movement in the North. By 1860, Florida had become a plantation state, with Middle Florida experiencing significant growth driven by wealthy planters. The election of Abraham Lincoln and the Republicans in 1860 further fueled secessionist sentiments. Governor Perry called a secession convention in Tallahassee, with a majority of wealthy and conservative delegates supporting immediate secession. Florida was the third Southern state to secede from the Union. Florida Governor Madison Perry sought to seize federal arsenals in St. Augustine, Fernandina, and Chattahoochee to arm the state militia. The first clash took place near Fort Barrancas. Some historians argue that this small battle could possibly have been the opening shots of the Civil War. It took place right around the same time as the Confederate attack on Fort Sumter. The Civil War had officially begun. The Confederate government requested that the state of Florida provide 5,000 soldiers. Within 3 months, 6,772 men had volunteered. The recruits were predominantly small farmers who did not own slaves. The Union blockade of Florida. As part of the Union's overall strategy to strangle the Confederacy, the Union blockade was implemented, surrounding the vast coastline of Florida. Confederate Secretary of the Navy Stephen Mallory, the lone Floridian in the rebel cabinet, had to prioritize defending strategic areas like Savannah and Charleston, leaving Florida's coastline vulnerable. Union gunboats prowled the Gulf of Mexico looking to disrupt Confederate trade. They operated from ports that were already under Union control. These were Fort Taylor in Key West and Fort Pickens in Pensacola. Union troops were also able to quickly capture the cities of Jacksonville and Cedar Key. Control of these key port cities effectively nullified Confederate coastal defense in the state. The Confederacy attempted to counteract the blockade by employing fast-moving ships known as blockade runners. The South relied on them to trade in the Caribbean. Florida played a crucial role in supplying food products to Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia. The primarily consisted of two key resources, cattle and salt. Salt was an essential commodity in an era before refrigeration. Salt was used to preserve food over extended periods. Florida's salt production was centered in the coastal town of St. Augustine, where salt was harvested from the ocean using large pans, boiling the water and collecting the salt that remained. By 1864, Florida was producing over 1 million pounds of salt per year. Union gunboats attempted to control Tampa Bay and Charlotte Harbor, occasionally targeting salt factories. The Confederacy recognized Florida's significance in cattle production and relocated herds to the Kissimmee Valley as Union threats increased. This was facilitated by Florida's cow cavalry. This was a unit of mounted soldiers who were responsible for protecting the state's cattle herds and other resources from Union raiders. Key battles in the state of Florida. The Battle of Olustee, February 20, 1864. Also known as the Battle of Ocean Pond, this was the largest Civil War battle fought in the state of Florida. It occurred near Lake City in northern Florida. Union forces, led by General Truman Seymour, attempted to advance west toward Tallahassee. Confederate forces successfully repelled the Union advance. The battle resulted in a decisive Confederate victory, forcing the Union troops to retreat to Jacksonville. Battlefield casualties were high, with the Union suffering heavier losses. On March 6, 1865, the Battle of Natural Bridge took place near Tallahassee. The name Natural Bridge refers to a naturally occurring limestone bridge spanning the St. Marks River. The Confederate defenders utilized this natural bridge as a strategic advantage. The bridge provided a natural barrier that obstructed the Union forces' advance and protected the Confederate positions on the opposite side of the river. The Confederate defenders, commanded by Colonel George P. Harrison, Jr., managed to repel the Union assault. The Battle of Natural Bridge was a Confederate victory, preventing Union forces from advancing on Tallahassee. The fall of Confederate Florida. In the spring of 1865, reports indicated that the South was losing the war, but Florida remained optimistic due to their success repelling 2 Union invasions. However, Governor Milton received reports of destruction and suffering from battlefields in Georgia and beyond. This caused him to be less optimistic. As Florida's forces dwindled, Milton requested more soldiers from Confederate President Jefferson Davis. This support would never arrive. After escaping an attempted kidnapping, the despondent governor returned home and took his own life. 8 days later, General Robert E. Lee surrendered at Appomattox and the war came to a conclusion. President Lincoln was assassinated just a few days later. The investigation that followed revealed that there was a Floridian involved named Lewis Powell. The former Confederate soldier was recruited by John Wilkes Booth to participate in the plot. The assassination was aimed at attacking multiple high-ranking government officials simultaneously. Powell's role was to assassinate Secretary of State William Seward. Seward narrowly survived the attack and sustained severe injuries. Powell was captured days after the Lincoln assassination. He was tried by military tribunal, found guilty, and was later executed by hanging on July 7, 1865. In total, approximately 15,000 Floridians served in the Confederate Army during the Civil War. Of these, over 5,000 died in battle or from disease, making Florida one of the states with the highest percentage of soldiers killed during the war. Over 2,000 Floridians served in the Union Army during the conflict. Many runaway slaves joined the U.S. colored troops and served proudly until the Confederate surrender. Tallahassee had held out until the conclusion of the war. It was the only Confederate capital east of the Mississippi that did not fall during the conflict. Thousands of African American slaves were now free and looked to build a new life. The citizens of Florida would have to pick of the pieces of their shattered lives and prepare for the future. The difficult period known as Reconstruction was set to begin. We want to thank you for watching this episode of Florida Films. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel to learn more about Florida history.